Tonight we're at a very rare exhibition delving into the diverse heritage of Goresbridge and its hinterlands. And the man who's going to take me on the tour is Ned Moran.
Welcome, Siobhan. Welcome to Inandara. Let's go have a look.
Great. Ned, the exhibition here in Goresbridge for Heritage Week, it's something you do every year.
Yes, we've been doing this now for about 10 years essentially, and basically we're looking at aspects of local history. That's the basic kind of premise of what we do, like. And each year we kind of picked a theme, like, and around that theme other aspects of the local history was also displayed.
So what was the theme this year?
The theme this year was a retrospect of that kind of period of displays. So we looked at all our displays and gave a kind of a bird's eye view of what we've been doing over the years.
So people can come along and see old photographs, artefacts, things like this, like the old blacksmith's forge, but also there's lovely stories between the great houses here in Goresbridge and the great families.
Yeah, it's essentially looking at how people lived, what people worked at, people like blacksmiths, and the different types of houses, such as the wealthier families who lived in the bigger Georgian type house, but or the ordinary people who lived in the kind of vernacular houses, the locally built and locally sourced houses. Okay. And then looked at what people did in their spare times, the sport in other words, and pastimes. So we looked at all those at various different periods, like things like skittles, things like cricket, which was played here quite a bit, like in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
And handball?
And handball. Handball was a very important sport here. People like the Duns and the Manns were very prominent handballers in this area, and they had converted an old mill down near the river, like, into a handball alley, and that was probably done like maybe in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
And right behind us here, there's a forge. Now, this would have been very popular in every town where...
Yeah, every town, village would have their forge, and every area of the countryside would have a forge. The blacksmith was an important kind of person within any community. Going back into medieval and earlier times, since iron started to be used, like, the blacksmith was a focal point within any community. Not only did he work with iron and work with that, but there were also the forges were places where people came to find out information, and in the medieval times, like, proclamations were very often posted up at forges, and the blacksmith, who was very often a fairly learned man in his own way, would read out proclamations, because a lot of people couldn't read, obviously. So the forge was always important, like, and continued up until the early 20th century, until industry and the use of the tractor and the use of the motor car done away with the horses, and factory-made tools and implements took over from the forge-made implements. So the forge died out in the early 20th century.
So now, talking about industry, another important industry that was here was on the canal. And I can see a beautiful model over here, made by yourself.
Yes, in my spare time. Yes, this is a model of a lock on the canal. In the 1700s, particularly the late 1700s, in order to improve transport within the country, they built some of the canals, such as the Royal Canal and the Grand Canal, but they also improved navigation on the River Barrow. And this is a section of the River Barrow representing the Lower Ballian Lock, or Ling's Lock as it's referred to. And the whole transport system was a backup to any kind of industrialization that was happening, particularly the milling business.
Now, another thing that's caught my eye, the vernacular housing in the Irish countryside. This is extraordinary. So you're going into all the different type of houses that would have been built back in the day, from cottages to farmhouses. But like, vernacular, to me, what that means, like, it's something local's tradesman, or?
Essentially, vernacular means houses that were built from local materials and by local tradesmen, and from plans, if you like to call it, that had filtered down through the ages, like. Mm-hmm. They weren't designed by architects, they weren't taken from glossy kind of bungalow bliss kind of magazines or anything. Mm. Simply local houses that were built, all the materials such as the roofing, the walls, the timber was all locally sourced, and it was, easy to get at, and they're relatively cheap to build.
So Ned, over here we've got the start of the chemical or the lime industry, and that's a feature for this week's Heritage Week.
Yeah, this year Heritage Council have decided to feature industrial heritage as part of their brief for different areas to focus on. And some years ago we did a feature, and they did a survey essentially of lime kilns in the Skagfordstein Powerstone area. Here we have an example of some of the remaining surviving lime kilns in the area.